Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Anne and I'm the consultant at the Digital Transformation Hub, the part of the InfoExchange group with Connecting Up. The Hub focuses on digital technology as an enabler to support service transformation and new ways of working, assisting nonprofits on a broader digital transformation journey. Before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issue, please type it into the chat box on your webinar panel and I can assist you. If you have any question during the session, please also type in the chat box and Sophie and I will answer them by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think of throughout the session to make this as interactive a session as possible. No question is too silly. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'll also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to NFP Employees Mastering 365, working with Cloud Files with Sophie. Hi, Sophie.
Thanks, Anne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I first would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here on the call today. Firstly, a little bit about myself. Myself and Anne are digital transformation consultants here at the Digital Transformation Hub. So we spend our days talking with a range of non-for-profits, understanding their Microsoft 365 environment, understanding their tech needs, whether that's in their information systems space, their IT management, or their cybersecurity, and helping them take the next step in their digital transformation. Ultimately, I love talking to non-for-profits and understanding the services they deliver and how technology can enable them to do that effectively. And I think it can be daunting, but I really enjoy that conversation and always welcome it. By the end of this webinar, you will be able to evaluate the best option to suit your need when file sharing. Discuss why one option stands out as the preferred option when file sharing, and weigh up different considerations when file sharing internally and externally. Ensure that the best fit solution is selected. Ultimately, we want to build your confidence and understanding in your files, where they're saved and how they're saved, so that you feel confident next time you're working with colleagues and you can improve your remote working or hybrid working experience. We will conclude this session with hopefully a relatable example so that you can actually unpack this Microsoft lingo and apply it to your day-to-day working. Great. So before we dive into what the cloud technology is and what's within Microsoft 365, the question that first comes to mind for me is why? Why is everyone using cloud technology? Why is everyone using Microsoft 365? Although it can be daunting, it provides really great flexibility and opportunity to yourself and your team. Firstly, it enables version history. So the version is automatically updated every time you save the document. So rather than having to save it as version 1, version 2, version 3, make sure no one's editing in version 1, etc., it's all within one. And if you need a history of when someone last edited it, you can get that report and go back as well. Collaborating and editing at the same time. This is a huge win, and I use this in my day-to-day working. Normally, you would have to mark up the document, make sure people aren't using, different versions as they're doing that, etc. Now you can do it all in one document and work together effectively at the same time. External sharing. So instead of sending a file like you had to in an attachment to an email and you had file size limitations, now you can share larger files by sending links. The recipient is then able to access them And this enables you additional controls around who can see the file and when. So you're not just sharing that file via email and they might send it on to whoever, etc. That risk is mitigated. Mobile access, which is a pro and a con sometimes, but you are able to access your documents and files at any time, anywhere. File level permissions. So now you can set access and editing permissions at a file level. Ability to create and store large files. Previously, you might have been limited by your network drive capability. Microsoft enables you to have 250 gigabytes of storage capacities. That's massive. So thinking about the benefits and the tools options that Microsoft 365 provide, we're going to dive into that. There are a lot of things within this Microsoft package, so let's unpack that a little bit more and hopefully we can aid you in understanding what product to use when. So let's go back to basics to understand the different types of cloud technology. Microsoft Office began as your Word, PowerPoint, Excel. It was your Office pack downloaded onto your computer. Microsoft shifted their model to what we call software as a service, or SaaS. So what that did, besides changing its pricing structure, which isn't relevant to today, more importantly, it gave us the opportunity to have more productivity services and cloud-based file storage and collaboration. So you no longer needed that large server room in the back of your office. There are a number of different technologies that we will talk about in this webinar when we're discussing cloud technologies. We're going to go through each of these. OneDrive. So that's the cloud image. That stores your personal files. Then you can share them with others by granting them permission to access those files from any location or device. Microsoft Teams. Teams is a collaborative app built for your team. Whether working remotely or in the office together, you can develop, collaborate, and publish your work. It's a workspace hub that has a centralized chat system that connects teams and enables quick messaging and file sharing. In a way, it's a lot more efficient than email and can cope with that bigger file management. The third component is SharePoint. We often see SharePoint used by larger non-for-profits or corporates. It should be used to store most organization files. It's designed to enable collaboration and sharing across the organization, all within a restricted group. You'll often find that large non-for-profits and corporates use it for their intranets. Thinking about the three apps, when should you use one over another? Let's start with OneDrive. OneDrive should be used to store documents and files that you wish to keep to yourself or private. It's a lot like that old network drive that we had for our personal use, but way more useful and easy to access and backed up in the cloud. So you can see in this image here, this has been synced. We've got OneDrive here on their File Explorer. With OneDrive, you no longer have to store files in your PC, as it will actually put it in the cloud to protect loss and deletion. And it will sync with your computer, which is where that using in File Explorer works really well. It can also be used to share or draft documents with people on a temporary basis until it's ready to store in Teams. So Teams is the front-end interface for SharePoint and OneDrive. You're just accessing it from a different way. Teams directs you to SharePoint when you open a file within here, so within what this image is showing you. Or OneDrive when you share files in a private chat. So if you're in a chat conversation with one-on-one, and you share a file that way, that's sharing in your OneDrive. Remember that then that private chat that you're talking in is only visible to the participants in that chat. And if someone in that person leaves the non-for-profit, that file is now lost. So we recommend to move it into Teams and move it into the file so that you can collaborate with your teams and your peers. When should you use SharePoint? SharePoint is used by several non-for-profits that we work with file storage and synchronization. For smaller non-for-profits, we recommend the use of Teams in preference to SharePoint. SharePoint is great for larger non-for-profits to use for an intranet when there's more complex organizational structures. Now that we've explained a little bit about SharePoint, we're actually going to focus on OneDrive and Teams, as these are the two technologies that the majority of you will be interested in and use already. Thinking about that, let's clearly compare the two. Both Teams and OneDrive do file storage. Teams, you set your file access based on permissions on that folder. Whereas in OneDrive, you control your permissions as it is your private OneDrive. So Teams, thinking on that, Teams is best used for sharing documents and collaborating. OneDrive is best used for your drafts. Both Teams and OneDrive have version history and collaboration enabled. Teams has the centralized control of permissions, whereas once again, OneDrive is individually managed, so you control who sees the document. This is the big win with Teams. Teams has dashboards, libraries, calendars, branding tools, chat functions, etc. It's got so many more tools to enable that collaboration piece with your file and working together. Whereas OneDrive is really only for file storage. So that's why it's also best for personal. So remember, OneDrive, instead of your thumb drives, instead of your hard drives or personal drives, is used to store and edit your personal documents in draft format. Teams is used to collaborate, communicate, and work on documents with internal and external teams. Now that you're starting to, I hope, pick up which ones to use where, sharing the file becomes the easy bit. So instead of sending the file like we did in a link in a document and you send it to the recipient in your emails, now you can actually, once it's in Teams looking at the image, you can just right click on it, copy link and create a link and share it that way. And when sending that link, you no longer need to be concerned about file size or email limits. You can just send it itself and that takes it all into consideration for you. So just to explain that bit, if that doesn't make sense to anyone, if your PowerPoint file is say 14 megabytes, but your email attachment limit is 10 megabytes, that PowerPoint won't send it as an attachment in the email. But if you sent it via a link, it would not cause any delays. So we've unpacked why you use cloud technology, the different products available, and when to use what. Let's try and apply that to a real life example to make sense of it all. So David here, David's just found a grant and he's really excited about it because it really applies to their project. He needs to go start a draft proposal of the grant. So he's going to save it somewhere where it can't be accessed by anyone but him. He's going to use his OneDrive to create this first draft. Once David has finished that draft and proofread it to himself, he's happy with it, he needs to send it to his colleagues to review. The best way to facilitate this, as he wants multiple people to review it at the same time, he's going to move from his OneDrive, he's going to move that document to his grant proposal folder in Teams, create a link, and share it to his team. His team then are going to click on that link and start marking it up and making changes and comments. David can review that as they're making the comments and make those changes, respond to those questions so that if he needs clarification or something, and they're working on it at the same time, collaborating and ensuring that the proposal is ready on time and has considered everyone in the team. Once David has resolved all the comments, completed the review, he's now ready to send it to his board. He's now going to send them that link and send them and ask them to read the board proposal and confirm that they can apply. So he's gone from OneDrive, where he's created his draft, and it's purely used as storage of the document, moved it into Teams to collaborate, share, and work with his colleagues effectively. We want you to feel confident working and collaborating with your team, and Microsoft and using the file storage to its full capacity has the potential to do that. And I hope by listening today, you've been able to understand a little bit more of what's set up on your computer and what to use when, and to enable you to work more effectively with your team. Now I'm going to pass it back to Anne for some questions. If you're there, Anne.
Oh, hi. Please feel free to start putting in questions if you have any. I haven't got any question here in chat. Oh, there is one. What is the best practice using OneDrive and Teams?
So the best practice is really using OneDrive for your personal pieces, or where it's not ready to share yet with others. Using OneDrive to collaborate really restricts both how people work and also restricts if you leave and then that document's gone, people no longer have access to it. So that's where that move into Teams is that best practice bit to do the collaboration and organizational ownership of the document. So OneDrive for personal, Teams for collaboration within your organization.
Yeah, we have a question here from Luke. How does collaborating in Teams differ to collaborations in SharePoint?
So SharePoint doesn't have that chat and the other components that are exclusive to Teams. So that is a key component of that collaboration piece, is that all of the additional components that Teams has really enables that. And that's why for organizations that sit in that small to medium size, we do recommend using Teams in that way because it's a familiar environment for all. We see success when SharePoint is used by larger non-for-profits for that intranet. It's a little bit more about sharing information with the organization as opposed to collaborating, which is where Teams is more suitable.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. David put a very nice comment here. Best description I ever heard was OneDrive for one person, SharePoint, share with people. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's what we really want to reiterate, because it will really change how you work together and make sure that all your files are stored securely.
Amazing. Another question. Hi, Sophie. While the document is in draft form and being marked up between Teams members, will each version of those drafts be saved, and how do you view or, for example, draft 2 or 3 on a certain day?
So when you're in that collaboration drafting phase, what I've seen work well is that there is a document owner and they might have some business rules around that. So it really depends on what's needed for your document, but that owner manages that. But really, you should only need to work in the one document until it's ready for final. And it's really complete then. If you need to go back and find different versions because you don't want the previous edit or something like that, you can go back into your history and find that. And happy to pop some additional information in the follow-up email about that as well. And so then you really want to be in that one document, but business rules that sit around that as well, and that document owner can really help your organization manage how you're editing together.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I hope that answers your question, Paul. Next question from Alicia. A file can only be shared if there are no security restriction on the file. Should I have a try with this question?
Yeah, you're most welcome.
It's hi Alicia. It depends on where you store the files and what kind of security restriction you're talking about. So as we have talked like in this webinar, OneDrive, if the file is in OneDrive, this can only be accessed by you. Once you choose to share it with other people, then they will have access to that file in OneDrive. However, if you store the file in a shared space with maybe a SharePoint space or in Teams, then whoever have access to that shared space can access the file. It depends on how your admin or administrator of your environment allow you to share it externally or internally. Do they put the restriction on different level of sharing, like you can only share among people who are already got access to that share space, or you can share to people who are also in your organization. So that's depending, but general comments, yeah. If in OneDrive, by default, it can only be accessed by you, but when you choose to share it, yeah, you can start sharing with other people as well. Next question from Sandy. If OneDrive files are personal and lost when a person leaves, where should organization files be stored?
Do you want to jump in on that one, Anne, as well?
So previously with other client, when you set up their Office 365, both OneDrive, Teams, or SharePoint, we always recommend organization. They always need at least 2 people in a shared space to make sure whoever leaves, they're always that another person playing the admin role, so they have full access to that area. Even with OneDrive as a part of the leave management process, you always grant the access to that person OneDrive to another person, like the direct manager or whoever should manage the leave process. You give access to OneDrive and then have a backup of their OneDrive before you actually delete the account. So that's a part of the leave management process. OneDrive files are personal. You should not use it as a space for organizational files because, yeah, the leave management process is not foolproof. Sometimes people forget things and then files are lost in translation. So put it in a shared space like SharePoint or Teamspace for organizational files. I hope that answers your questions. Another question from David. How do you set up folders, etc. in Teams?
Do you want to take that one, Anne?
Oh, good. With folders in Teams, Teams is a bit different from SharePoint or OneDrive. So when you look at SharePoint or OneDrive, you might look at it purely as a file management tools. Sometimes people look at it as a file management tools because it has traits and features that are similar to the file explorer that you have always been using. You can even sync to OneDrive and sync SharePoint folder to your local computer. So you have so people with find it challenging to use cloud space will have the same experience that they have always having with File Explorer on their local computer. But with Teams, it's a bit different. It's embraced the new concept of collaborations. You start having teams, then you have channels in there, and you can set up permissions by channels. So it's a bit different in structure and the way you organize your folder. There are many ways you can structure these channels, either by teams or by projects or a mix. Then you organize your folders and files accordingly. Luckily, the file storage technology behind Teams is still SharePoint, OneDrive, so you can still sync those folders to your local computer and have the same experience in File Explorer. I hope that answers your question. Please continue to pop in questions, and then, yeah, if you have any questions. Raphael, many thanks, most informative. Thank you. I hope you have a good afternoon as well. We still have a few more minutes for questions. After this, at the end of this webinar, there will be a survey. Please, it'll be great if you can help us put in some survey. David put in a comment, I see so still SharePoint Teams is just still SharePoint Teams is just the access point. So yeah, from my perspective, Teams is a superpower tools pulling all those pieces of Office 365 together. So you have a single place to go to instead of having to going around and looking for information here and there. But yeah, how you structure, how you see it in Teams is a bit different from SharePoint. So we still have a few more seconds for questions. If you don't have any questions, and come back and review this session, and if you still have more other questions, please feel free to put in our survey or be in touch with us through emails. I hope that you have a nice lunch and learn session today with Sophie and I, and see you soon in the next sessions. Thank you. Bye.